All right, this is Mr. Gillum, and today we're going to start learning how to add and subtract decimals, positives and negatives. So I know you've done decimals in the past, and one of those important things to keep in mind is where you put the decimal point and how you align them. So that's really important. We're going to get that. The first thing you need to do is rewrite it as an addition or subtraction problem. So same signs, add and keep, different signs, subtract. And then when we're adding our decimals, so like for example, what I'm talking about is if I had like 2.34 and 12.4. Notice how the decimal points are lined up. Okay, that's going to matter. I also need to use 0 as a placeholder if necessary. So whether I'm adding or subtracting, I need that 0 as a placeholder. Now I know this might be a lot of review, but when I add those positive and negative signs in there, it's going to make it that much more tricky. So let's take a look. Okay, if I want to add 5.67 with negative 0.35. What I'm going to do is I like the vertical method. So I'm going to do 5.67 plus negative 0.35. So what's happening when I'm adding a negative is I'm actually getting smaller. So instead of writing plus negative 0.35, we know that that would be the same thing as saying subtracting 0.35. Okay, we're just changing that addition problem into a subtraction problem. And so now if I do it vertically, 5.67 minus 0.35, instead of plus and negative 0.35, I can subtract. 7 minus 5 is 2. 6 minus 3 is 3. And then my decimal point. And then 5 minus 0 is 5. 5.32. Okay, so the simplified or the evaluation of that would be 5.32. All right. Next, ooh, tricky one. Okay, what I'm going to do here, I see the subtraction, but unfortunately this is a negative sign out here. So what I'm going to do is this, I'm going to do change. All right, and I know that if they're the same signs, I can add and keep the sign. So what I'm doing, instead of actually subtracting like the original problem said, I'm going to start with my 6.82. I'm going to add it with 8.47. Same signs, add and keep. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add these, but I'm going to make sure that my answer ends up being negative. Same signs, add and keep the negative. So negative and then more negative is going to be a negative outcome, but really what I'm doing is I'm adding the numbers together. So I'm writing this addition problem with two negatives, same size, I'm going to add and I'm going to keep the sign. So I'm just going to add these numbers together. 9, 2, because 8 plus 4 is 12, so I put the 2 down and I carry over a 1. 8, 14, 15. 15, and then my decimal place, 15.29. So because they were both negative and I'm adding them together, my total, my final answer, negative 15.29. And let's look at another one. Oh, okay, this is another negative plus a negative. So same signs, when I'm adding, I'm going to keep the sign. So I just need to make sure that my outcome is negative. Same signs, add and keep. So I'm going to say 0.6 or 0.6 plus 9.56. Now I need to make sure that I keep my decimal point aligned here before I add these together. And just to help myself, I need to make sure I put a place value of a 0 there. And when I add, 0 plus 6 is 6. 6 plus 5 is 11, so I'm going to keep the ones digit, but I'm going to add a ones to the tens side. Or actually it'd be the ones digit. 9 plus 0 plus 1 is 10. 10.16, which will make sense. However, because we're having the same sign, we're going to add them together and we're going to keep the sign. So my actual outcome is going to be negative 10.16. Negative 10 and 1600ths. All right. So let's take a look at a few more here. I think we got 9 examples to get through here, and I think you're going to catch on pretty quickly. This is where things get a little trickier. Same signs, add and keep. So I'm going to do a change. Now I have negative 4.821 plus 3.2. Different sign, subtract. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract, and I'm going to keep the sign of the bigger number. So I'm going to say 4.821 minus 3.32. Oops, sorry, 3.2 is all. All right, and so same signs, add and keep, different signs, subtract. So I take the big number minus the small number, keep the sign of the bigger number. Now 4.8 is bigger than 3.2, so I need to make sure that my outcome is negative. But after I subtract, I'm going to go put a few 0 placeholders in. 1 minus 0 is 1, 2 minus 0 is 2. 8 minus 2 is 6. My decimal point, 4 minus 3 is 1. So I know my solution, or my evaluation of this expression, will be negative 1.621. All right. So let's take a look at another one. Now I have subtraction again, but the nice thing about subtraction, I can change it to addition, because I know if I kept that as subtraction, I'd end up in the negatives, and that's going to be problematical for us to actually go to the negatives. So I'm going to change it to addition. I'm going to say 3.18 plus negative 7.92. Same signs add and keep. They're not the same sign. Different signs subtract. So I'm going to take 7.92 minus 3.18. I'm going to keep the sign of the bigger number, so I know that my 7.92 is bigger than 3.18, and keep that negative, and then I just need to subtract. So I'm going to borrow from the ones, or from the tenths, to get my 1,000ths. So I'm going to borrow, and I'm going to change that to a 12. 12 minus 8 is 4. 8 minus 1 is 7, and 7 minus 3 is 4. 4.74. Negative 4.74, I should say. Same signs, add and keep, different signs subtract. So I subtracted, I'm keeping the sign of the bigger number, and there's my evaluation, negative 4.74. Once again, we have a subtraction, double subtraction. I'm going to do a change, and now my actual question is negative 8.25 plus 8.14. And so, same signs add and keep, they're not the same, different signs subtract. 0.25 minus 8.14. And I'm going to keep the sign of the bigger number. Now 8.25 is a little bigger than 8.14, so I'm going to keep it negative. Now I'm going to just do my subtraction. 5 minus 4 is 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. My decimal place and 0. Negative 0.11. And that would make sense because I'm a little more in the hole than I am out of the hole. Negative 0.11. Let's just try 3 more. And the more decimals I get, the more difficult they are. Negative 21.45 plus negative 6.781. So let's take a look here. Same signs add and keep. So I'm just going to add these numbers together. 21.45 plus 6.781. Keep the sign, or sorry, same signs add and keep the sign. So I just know that my answer itself is going to be negative. I'm going to put a 0 on here for a placeholder. I'm going to add vertically. 0 plus 1 is 1. 5 plus 8 is 13. That gives me an extra for my tenths place. 4 plus 1 plus 7, 12. My decimal, I need to carry my 1. 1, 2, 8. And then finally a 2. 28.231. Negative 28.231. Two negatives. Same signs. We're going to add them together, but we're going to keep that negative. So there's my evaluated sum. Oh, this one's already set up nicely for us. Same signs add and keep. They're not the same signs. Different signs subtract. So I'm going to take 3.003 minus 2.560. And I'm going to keep the sign of the bigger number. In this case, the bigger number happens to be 3. So my solution is actually going to be 3. Or it's going to be positive. 3 minus 0 is 3. Ooh, tricky one. If I need to borrow for this 0, and this is a 0 as well, I'm just going to cross this out and call him 29. 30 changes into 29. And that gives me my borrowed hundredths place. 10 minus 6 is 4. 9 minus 5 is 4. And 2 minus 2 is 0. So my solution is 0.443. My evaluated sum. And last but not least, once again, this is a nice one for us because it's the same sign, so we can add and we can keep the sign. So I'm going to take my 10.45 plus my 23.6. I'm going to add a 0 for a placeholder, and I just need to keep my sign. So I need to know my outcome is going to be negative. 5, 0, carry the 1, 4, 3. Negative 34.05. And that's it. Okay, so all the same rules that we've been doing. Same sign add and keep, different sign subtract, keep the sign of the bigger number, then you'll be exact that little rhyme we've been doing in class. Okay, that applies for decimals as well. Just make sure that when you decide whether to add or subtract, you do keep the necessary sign. So negative, negative, they're the same sign. Our outcome should be negative as well. Different signs, we're going to subtract the two numbers, and we're going to keep the sign of the bigger number. In this case, it was positive, so we kept it positive. Same signs, add and keep, so we add them together, and we're going to keep the negative sign because they're both negative. All right, so that's it for today.